Hello everyone, enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
Monday morning was like any other day for Amanda. The sun was just beginning to rise as she stepped out of her luxurious apartment, dressed in a crisp suit and carrying an Italian leather briefcase. Her hurried footsteps echoed along the still empty sidewalks of the city that never sleeps. She checked her watch for the second time in 10 minutes, a critical meeting awaited her, and she couldn't be late. Her eyes, usually so attentive to every detail, barely noticed the people she passed. To her, they were merely obstacles on her path to success. As she rounded a corner, Amanda nearly stumbled over an obstacle, a woman around 80 years old standing in the middle of the sidewalk, holding a bag of pastries. "Hello, miss, would you like to buy some pastries?" "Please help me," the old woman said in a trembling voice. Amanda looked down, irritation clear in her piercing blue eyes. The frail woman, with disheveled gray hair and clothes that had seen better days, looked up at Amanda with hopeful brown eyes, meeting hers for just a moment. "Get out of the way, old lady," Amanda growled, pushing the woman aside with more force than she intended. The bag of pastries tumbled to the ground, scattering across the sidewalk. The attorney didn't even look back, leaving the woman alone to pick up her pastries. Had she looked back, she would have seen the old woman's tear-filled eyes, a mix of hurt and resignation that no one should have to endure. 30 minutes later, Amanda walked into her office, one of the most prestigious law firms in the city. Her assistant, Brisa, was waiting with a black coffee and a stack of documents. "Good morning, Ms. Amanda," she said, handing her the coffee. "Your meeting with the partner company's CEO starts in 15 minutes in the conference room." Amanda nodded, taking the documents. "Any messages?" Brisa hesitated a moment. "Well, there was one. Carla called, she said it was urgent and asked that you call back as soon as possible." The name made Amanda pause. Carla, her best friend from school days, whom she hadn't seen or spoken to in nearly a decade. Carla, Amanda murmured, more to herself than to Brisa. Memories flooded her mind, late-night study sessions, shared dreams, promises of eternal friendship, and then the gradual drifting apart, different career choices, increasingly lengthy silences. "Ms. Amanda," Brisa's voice pulled her back to the present. "The meeting, yes, of course," Amanda quickly collected herself. "I'll handle it later. Let's go to the meeting." The next 3 hours were a blur of negotiations, contracts, and legal strategy. Amanda was in her element, her sharp mind analyzing each clause, anticipating every move of the partner company's executives. But somewhere in her mind, the echo of Carla's name lingered, a reminder of a past almost forgotten. When the meeting finally ended, Amanda returned to her office and closed the door. She stared at the phone for a long time before picking it up and dialing the number Brisa had noted. The phone rang once, twice, and on the third ring, a familiar but wearier voice than she remembered answered. "Hello. Carla, it's Amanda." There was a long silence on the other end, long enough that Amanda almost thought the call had disconnected. "Amanda?" Finally, Carla responded, her voice a blend of relief and apprehension. "I wasn't sure you'd call back." "What happened, Carla?" Brisa said it was urgent. Another moment of silence, then. "It's about my mother, Felicia." Amanda frowned, vaguely remembering Carla's mother, a woman she'd met only once despite many visits to Carla's house. "What about your mother?" "She's been missing, Amanda, for 4 years now." Amanda's world seemed to stop for a moment. "For years? Carla, why didn't you find me sooner?" "I tried, Amanda, at first, but you were always busy, always in important meetings, and then, it just seemed too late." Regret hit Amanda like a punch to the gut. She recalled all the times she had ignored Carla's calls, all the times she had prioritized her work over everything and everyone else. I'm sorry, Carla. I didn't know." "It's not your fault," Carla replied, though there was a hint of bitterness in her voice. "Look, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. It's just. I'm desperate, Amanda. The police gave up long ago. I need help. Amanda closed her eyes, remembering the old woman she had encountered that morning. An uncomfortable feeling began to form in her chest. What does she look like, Carla? Your mother, Felicia. She's 83 now, gray hair, brown eyes. She's always been thin, you know, and she has a habit of twisting her hair when she's worried. The description made Amanda's heart race. It couldn't be, could it? Carla, I have to go, but I'll help you, okay? I promise. As soon as she hung up, Amanda grabbed her coat and hurried out of the office, ignoring the confused looks from her colleagues. She had to get back to that street, she had to find that old woman. As she ran through the streets, Amanda felt something she hadn't felt in years: fear. Fear of being wrong, fear of being right, fear that her indifference had cost her more than she had ever imagined. When she finally arrived at the corner where she had encountered the old woman, Amanda stopped, panting, her eyes scanning the area, hoping to find those brown eyes, that disheveled gray hair. And then she saw her, sitting on the steps of a building, her bag of pastries beside her. The old woman stared into the distance with a defeated look that broke Amanda's heart. With hesitant steps, Amanda approached. The old woman looked up, recognition and fear flashing in her eyes. Hello, Amanda said softly, kneeling to meet her gaze. I'm sorry about earlier. What's your name? The old woman hesitated a moment before answering softly. Felicia. In that moment, Amanda knew her life would never be the same. The name Felicia echoed in her mind like a warning bell. She knelt there on the sidewalk, staring at the old woman in shock and disbelief. The world around her seemed to slow down, the noise of the city fading into a distant hum. Felicia, Amanda repeated softly, as if testing the sound of the name. That's a beautiful name. How old are you? The old woman hesitated, her brown eyes scanning Amanda's face with a mix of caution and curiosity. 83, she finally replied, her voice hoarse and faint. Amanda felt her heart clench. 83, just as Carla had said. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. Ms. Felicia, I know I started off on the wrong foot this morning, and I'm truly sorry for that. But I'd like to make it up to you. How about I buy all your pastries? Felicia's eyes widened in surprise. All of them? But why? Let's just say it's my way of apologizing, Amanda smiled, trying to be reassuring. And maybe we could chat a bit over a pastry or two. What do you think? Felicia twisted her hair, a gesture that Amanda immediately recognized from Carla's description. After a moment of consideration, the old woman slowly nodded. Amanda bought the pastries and guided Felicia to a nearby bench in a small park. As they sat, she noticed that Felicia seemed uncomfortable, her eyes continuously scanning the area as if searching for an escape. So, Ms. Felicia, Amanda began, breaking a pastry in half. Do you live around here? Felicia shrugged, taking a pastry for herself. Close enough. I move around a lot. And your family? Don't they move with you? The old woman tensed, her fingers tightening around the pastry. I don't have any family, she mumbled, avoiding Amanda's gaze. Amanda felt a wave of empathy and regret. How could she have been so heartless that morning? I'm sorry, Ms. Felicia. It must be difficult. Felicia shrugged again, but Amanda could see the pain in her eyes. I'm used to it. It's better this way. Better? What do you mean? No one can hurt me if I don't care about anyone, Ms. Felicia replied, her voice tinged with disappointment and sadness. Amanda felt her heart break. What had this old woman gone through to develop such a dark perspective on the world? She wrestled with the urge to hug Ms. Felicia, knowing it might frighten her. Ms. Felicia, I know we just met, but I want you to know that there are still good people in this world, people who care. The old woman looked at Amanda, her eyes full of wisdom. Like you, the one who shoved me this morning. Shame hit Amanda like a punch to the gut. You're right. What I did was wrong, and I truly apologize. But I'm here now, trying to make it right. Sometimes, people make mistakes, but what matters is recognizing them and trying to do better. You're old enough to know that, aren't you? Ms. Felicia seemed to ponder Amanda's words for a moment. Maybe, she finally said, her voice soft. But not everyone tries to make things right. No, not everyone does, Amanda agreed. But some people do, and sometimes that makes all the difference. They sat in silence for a few minutes, eating pastries and watching the people pass by. Amanda struggled internally, trying to decide how to bring up Carla. Ms. Felicia, she began hesitantly. Is there anything you'd like to share about your life before you started moving around a lot? The old woman tensed up, her eyes growing distant. Why do you want to know? Amanda chose her next words carefully. Because I think I might know someone who's looking for you, someone who cares about you deeply. Ms. Felicia's eyes widened, hope and fear flashing across her face. Who? Your daughter, Ms. Felicia. Carla. The name seemed to hit Ms. Felicia like a bolt of lightning. She stood up, spilling the box of pastries onto the ground. You're lying, she exclaimed, tears starting to fill her eyes. My children didn't want me. They abandoned me. Amanda stood up as well, raising her hands in a gesture of plea. No, Miss Felicia, that's not true. Carla has been searching for you for years. She's desperate to find you. Miss Felicia shook her head in denial, tears now streaming freely down her face. No, you don't know anything. She left me. She. The old woman couldn't finish her sentence, her frail body racked with sobs. Without thinking, Amanda knelt down and wrapped her arms around Miss Felicia. The old woman sorrowfully buried her face in Amanda's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. It's okay, Miss Felicia, Amanda whispered, gently rubbing her back. It's okay, cry if you need to. You've been through so much. They stayed like that for a few minutes, Amanda holding Miss Felicia as she cried out years of pain and loneliness. When the sobs finally subsided, Amanda gently pulled the old woman back to look into her eyes. Miss Felicia, I promise you I will find out what happened. I'll help you and your daughter reunite. But first, I need to know where you're staying right now. Could you take me to your place? Miss Felicia hesitated, nervously twisting her hair. It's not really a home, she mumbled. Just a place I stay. Amanda nodded, trying to keep her face neutral even though she was deeply concerned. All right, could you show me? Reluctantly, Miss Felicia agreed, and they began to walk. Eventually, they arrived at an abandoned building, its windows broken and walls covered in grime. This is it, Miss Felicia said quietly, leading Amanda through a side entrance. Inside, the building was cold and damp, with a musty smell hanging in the air. She led Amanda to a corner where an old mattress lay on the floor, covered with a thin blanket. A few carefully folded clothes sat beside it along with a worn backpack. Amanda's heart clenched as she took in the conditions Miss Felicia was living in. Miss Felicia, she said gently. You can't stay here. It's not safe. The old woman shrugged, sitting down on the mattress. It's better than the street. Amanda sat down beside her, looking her in the eye. I know you have no reason to trust me, but I want to help. How about staying with me tonight? I have a guest room in my apartment. Tomorrow, we can start looking for Carla together. What do you think? Miss Felicia looked at Amanda for a long time, her brown eyes filled with conflict. Finally, she nodded slowly. All right, she whispered. But just for tonight. Amanda smiled, feeling a wave of relief. Good. Let's gather your things. As she helped Miss Felicia pack up her few belongings, Amanda silently promised herself that she would make things right. She would reunite Ms. Felicia with Carla and uncover the truth behind her disappearance. And in the process, perhaps she could also mend herself. As they left the abandoned building, the sun was setting, casting hues of orange and pink across the sky. Amanda glanced over at Ms. Felicia walking beside her and felt a mix of determination and hope. This was only the beginning of her journey, but for the first time in years, Amanda felt like she was on the right path. Amanda's apartment was a stark contrast to the abandoned building where Ms. Felicia had been living. Polished hardwood floors, modern art on the walls, and designer furniture created an atmosphere of luxury and sophistication that made Ms. Felicia pause at the entrance, her eyes wide with wonder. "Wow," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Do you live here alone?" Amanda felt a pang of guilt seeing her reaction. "Yes," she replied, leading the old woman inside. "But tonight, you'll be staying here with me." Ms. Felicia nodded quietly, her brown eyes scanning every detail of the apartment as if trying to commit everything to memory. Amanda observed her, noting how small and out of place she seemed in the luxurious space. "Come with me, I'll show you where you'll sleep," Amanda said gently, guiding her. The guest room was spacious and beautifully decorated, with a large bed that seemed to swallow Ms. Felicia as she sat down hesitantly. "Make yourself comfortable," Amanda said, trying to sound reassuring. "There's a bathroom right there," she pointed to a door. "Feel free to take a hot shower while I prepare something to eat." Ms. Felicia twisted her hair, a gesture Amanda had begun to associate with nervousness. I don't have any other clothes," she admitted softly, the embarrassment evident in her voice. Amanda's heart clenched. "Don't worry about that," she said quickly. "I'll find something that'll work for you, okay?" After rummaging through her closet, Amanda found an old t-shirt and a pair of soft pants that, though still too large, would work for Ms. Felicia to sleep in. She left them in the bathroom along with fresh towels and went to the kitchen to prepare dinner. While chopping vegetables for the soup, Amanda couldn't stop thinking about how drastically her life had changed in a single day. That morning, she had been a successful attorney, solely focused on her career. Now, she was caring for a homeless old woman who might be the long-lost mother of her childhood friend. The sound of soft footsteps pulled her out of her thoughts. Ms. Felicia stood in the kitchen doorway, looking small in Amanda's oversized clothes. Amanda smiled, trying to act casual. "Are you feeling better?" Ms. Felicia nodded shyly. "Thank you for the clothes," she murmured. "You're welcome. Come sit with me," Amanda pointed to one of the high chairs around the kitchen island. "The soup will be ready soon." As Amanda finished preparing the meal, she watched Ms. Felicia from the corner of her eye. The elderly woman looked more comfortable after her shower, but there was still clear tension in her shoulders. "So, Ms. Felicia," Amanda began, placing a steaming bowl of soup in front of her. "How long have you been on the streets?" Ms. Felicia stirred her soup with her spoon, avoiding Amanda's gaze. "Thank you for watching the video all the way through. You are our biggest motivation to keep creating. Let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far this video has reached around the world. Don't forget to hit like if you found it interesting, and share it with your friends too." "I'm not sure, a long time." Amanda nodded, sitting down beside her with her own bowl of soup. "And before that, do you remember where you were living?" The woman tensed up, her hand clenching around the spoon. "I don't want to talk about that." "All right," Amanda said gently, recognizing that she'd touched on a sensitive subject. "You don't have to share if you don't want to. But Ms. Felicia, I want you to know that I'm here to help. Your daughter, Carla, she's truly searching for you." Ms. Felicia's head shot up suddenly, her brown eyes lit with a mix of hope and fear. "How do you know? How do you know my daughter?" Amanda took a deep breath, knowing she needed to be honest. "Carla and I were best friends from school. We lost touch a few years ago, but today she called me, desperate for help to find you." Tears began to form in Ms. Felicia's eyes. But she abandoned me. She didn't want me." No, Miss Felicia, Amanda said firmly, holding back from embracing the elderly woman. I'm sure there's more to the story than that. Carla loves you, she's never given up searching for you. Miss Felicia shook her head, tears now streaming down her cheeks. You don't understand, she pushed me away. She said I was a burden. Amanda's heart broke, seeing the pain in Miss Felicia's eyes. She knew there was more to the story, but pressing Miss Felicia now would only push her away. Miss Felicia, look at me, Amanda said softly, waiting until the elderly woman looked into her eyes. I promise you, we'll figure out what really happened, but for now, you're safe here. No one is going to hurt you or push you away anymore, all right? Miss Felicia sniffled, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. All right, she whispered. They finished their meal in silence, Amanda glancing at Miss Felicia from time to time with concern. Once they were done, Amanda led the woman back to the guest room. Try to rest, she said, tucking the blanket around Miss Felicia. Tomorrow, we'll start figuring things out. I promise. Miss Felicia nodded sleepily, her eyes already beginning to close. Amanda stood there for a moment, watching the woman sleep before quietly leaving the room. Back in the living room, Amanda picked up her phone and dialed Carla's number. After a few rings, her old friend's anxious voice answered. Amanda, is there any news? Amanda took a deep breath. Carla, I found her. I found Miss Felicia. There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end, followed by a choked sob. Are you sure? Is she all right? Where is she? She's here with me, Carla. She's safe, Amanda hesitated, not wanting to worry her friend but knowing she needed to be honest. But something isn't right. Miss Felicia thinks you abandoned her. She says you pushed her away. What? Carla's voice was filled with shock and pain. Amanda, I would never do that. I love my mother more than anything in this world. I believe you, Carla, Amanda replied quickly. But something happened to make her believe you didn't want her. There was a long silence on the other end. When Carla spoke again, her voice was full of regret. Amanda, there's something you need to know, something I should have told you before. Amanda felt her stomach tighten. What is it, Carla? It's about my younger brother, Danny, Miss Felicia's youngest son, and what really happened the night she disappeared. As Carla began to tell her story, Amanda felt that she was about to dive into something far more complex and tangled than she had ever imagined. But as she looked toward the room where Miss Felicia was sleeping, she knew there was no turning back. She was committed now, no matter what lay ahead. The night stretched long before her, full of revelations and the promise of an uncertain tomorrow. But for the first time in years, Amanda felt she was exactly where she needed to be, ready to face whatever challenges awaited her. Amanda awoke, her back sore from sleeping on the couch. She stood up carefully, her thoughts immediately returning to her conversation with Carla the night before. Her friend's revelations still echoed in her mind, heavy and troubling. Making her way to the living room, Amanda opened the door softly. Miss Felicia was still sound asleep, her face relaxed in a way Amanda hadn't seen before. For a moment, she stood there watching the woman, thinking of everything Carla had told her. Miss Felicia's youngest son, Danny, was not who everyone thought he was. Carla revealed that he suffered from untreated bipolar disorder, cycling between periods of mania and deep depression. The night Miss Felicia disappeared, Danny had been in a manic state. Amanda closed her eyes, remembering the painful words from Carla. I was only gone for half an hour, Amanda, just half an hour to get his medication. When I came back, they were both gone. A slight movement on the bed pulled Amanda back to the present. Miss Felicia was waking up, her brown eyes blinking sleepily. Good morning, Amanda said softly, stepping into the room. How did you sleep? Miss Felicia sat up, rubbing her eyes. Okay, she mumbled. Better than in a long time. Amanda felt her heart clench. Let's have some breakfast, and then we can talk a bit, all right? Miss Felicia nodded hesitantly, and Amanda left her to get dressed. In the kitchen, as she prepared pancakes and orange juice, Amanda tried to organize her thoughts. How could she broach this topic with Miss Felicia without scaring her? When Miss Felicia appeared in the kitchen, still wearing Amanda's oversized clothes, Amanda smiled, placing a plate of pancakes in front of her. Please, eat as much as you like. They ate in silence for a few minutes, Amanda watching as Miss Felicia hungrily devoured the pancakes as if she hadn't eaten in days. She very well might not have, Amanda thought, feeling a pang in her chest. Miss Felicia, Amanda began gently once the woman had finished eating. I spoke to your daughter last night. Miss Felicia froze, fear flickering in her eyes. Did you tell her where I am? No, I didn't, Amanda quickly reassured her. I only told her you're safe. But Miss Felicia, there are some things we need to talk about from the night you disappeared. Miss Felicia lowered her head, her hands clenching. I don't want to talk about that. Amanda took a deep breath. I know it's difficult, Miss Felicia, but this is very important. Your daughter told me about your youngest son, about his illness. Miss Felicia's eyes filled with tears. Danny, my youngest son, said that Carla didn't want to take care of us anymore. He said I was a burden to her, that we had to run away. Amanda's heart broke at the pain in the elderly woman's eyes. Oh, Miss Felicia, she said softly, resisting the urge to hold the woman. Your son was ill, he wasn't thinking clearly. But he seemed so certain, Miss Felicia sobbed, tears now streaming freely down her face. Danny said that Carla would push us away, that she didn't love us. Amanda slowly moved closer to Miss Felicia, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. Miss Felicia, Carla loves you more than anything in the world. She never wanted you to leave. She's been searching for you all these years. Miss Felicia looked at Amanda, her eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and hope. Really? Yes, really, Amanda confirmed. Your daughter never gave up on you, Miss Felicia. She truly wants to see you. Miss Felicia twisted her hair, an internal struggle clear on her face. But, what about Danny, my youngest son? Amanda hesitated, knowing this next part would be the hardest. Miss Felicia, Danny, he passed away 3 years ago. I'm so sorry. The shock and pain that appeared on Miss Felicia's face was heartbreaking. The elderly woman began to tremble, her sobs racking her frail body. Without thinking, Amanda held her close, keeping her steady as she cried. It's okay, Miss Felicia, Amanda whispered, gently rubbing her back. Just cry, I'm here with you. When the sobs finally subsided, Miss Felicia slowly pulled back, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. What happens now? She asked, her voice hoarse from crying. Amanda looked into her eyes, seeing a mix of fear and hope. That's up to you, Miss Felicia. Your daughter truly wants to see you, but I won't pressure you into anything you're not ready for. We can go as slowly as you need. Miss Felicia nodded slowly. I think I want to see her, but I'm scared. Being scared is normal, Amanda reassured her. But remember, you're not alone in this. I'll be right there with you if you want. A small smile appeared on Miss Felicia's face, the first Amanda had seen since they met. Thank you, Amanda. At that moment, Amanda's phone rang. It was Brisa, her assistant. Ms. Amanda, I'm sorry to disturb you, but Ms. Carla is here at the office. She says it's urgent. Amanda's heart raced. Carla's there. Tell her I'm on my way. Hanging up, Amanda turned to Miss Felicia. Carla is at my office. Do you want to come with me to see her? Miss Felicia hesitated, fear clear in her eyes, but then she slowly nodded. Yes, I want to. All right, Amanda smiled, feeling a mix of relief and nervousness. Let's get ready and go together, okay? As she helped Miss Felicia prepare, Amanda couldn't stop thinking about how drastically her life had changed. From a lawyer solely focused on her career, she now found herself in the role of protector and mediator, preparing to reunite a mother and daughter torn apart by years of misunderstanding and tragedy. As they left the apartment, Amanda held Miss Felicia's hand, feeling the older woman's trembling. "It'll be okay," she reassured her. "I'm right here with you." As they walked toward Amanda's office, the morning sunlight bathed the streets, as if promising a fresh start. Amanda knew the road ahead would be challenging, but looking at Miss Felicia, she felt a renewed determination. She would help this family heal, no matter the cost. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, it was full of hope. The elevator ride up to Amanda's office felt endless, each floor passing by as if it took an eternity. Miss Felicia clutched Amanda's hand tightly, her brown eyes focused on the flashing numbers. Amanda looked at her, noticing her quickening breaths. "It's okay, Miss Felicia," she said gently. "Remember, we can leave any time you want." Miss Felicia nodded silently, twisting her hair once again. Amanda could feel her hand shaking and felt a pang in her heart. As a lawyer, she was used to high-pressure situations, but nothing in her career had prepared her for this moment. Finally, the elevator reached Amanda's office floor, and the doors opened with a soft ding. Miss Felicia hesitated for a moment before stepping out, still holding Amanda's hand. Brisa greeted them with a curious look, her eyes widening as she saw Miss Felicia. "Ms. Amanda, Miss Carla is in your office. She seems anxious." Amanda nodded, thanking her quietly. She turned to face Miss Felicia, looking into her eyes. "Miss Felicia, your daughter is just in there. Are you ready?" Miss Felicia swallowed, her eyes filling with tears. What if she doesn't want me?" Amanda's heart broke hearing the fear in the older woman's voice. "Miss Felicia, your daughter loves you more than anything in the world. She's never stopped looking for you. But if you're not ready, we can wait." Miss Felicia closed her eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When she opened them, there was a determination Amanda hadn't seen before. "No, I want to see her." Amanda smiled, feeling an indescribable pride for the woman beside her. "All right then, let's go." They walked together to Amanda's office door. Through the frosted glass, they could see the outline of a woman pacing back and forth. Amanda looked at Miss Felicia one last time, and the elderly woman nodded before she opened the door. Carla stopped in her tracks, her eyes immediately landing on the frail figure beside Amanda. Time seemed to freeze for a moment. Daughter and mother looked at each other for the first time in years. "Mom." Carla's voice was a choked whisper full of emotion. Miss Felicia took a tentative step forward, her brown eyes brimming with tears. "Daughter," she whispered softly. In a heartbeat, Carla crossed the room, kneeling down and wrapping her mother in a tight embrace. Sobs shook her as she held her mother, years of pain and longing finally finding relief. "My mother," Carla cried, her hand gently stroking Miss Felicia's hair. "My precious mother, I missed you so much." At first, Miss Felicia was tense, but then she slowly relaxed in her daughter's arms, her own tears soaking into Carla's shirt. I thought you didn't want me anymore. I thought I was a burden," she whispered. Carla pulled back slightly, holding her mother's face between her hands. "Never, Mom. Never think that. You are the most important person in my life. I never stopped loving you or searching for you." Amanda watched this scene, feeling tears of her own beginning to fall. She quietly moved to leave the room to give mother and daughter a private moment, but Miss Felicia's voice stopped her. "Amanda," the elderly woman looked up at her, reaching out a hand. "Please stay." Surprised and moved, Amanda nodded, moving to sit in a nearby chair. Carla looked at her, gratitude evident in her eyes. "Amanda," Carla said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to thank you. You brought my mother back to me. Amanda shook her head. There's no need to thank me. I only did what anyone would do. Ms. Felicia gently asked. Were you two friends once? Carla nodded, a small smile appearing on her face. Amanda and I have been close friends since school. She's like a sister to me. Amanda felt a wave of guilt hearing Carla's words. Carla, I'm so sorry. I should have been there for you when Miss Felicia disappeared. I was a terrible friend. Carla shook her head. No, Amanda. I understand. We all made mistakes, but you're here now, and you brought my mother back to me. That's all that matters. Miss Felicia looked at her daughter, hesitation in her eyes. Daughter, what happened that night? Why did Danny say you didn't want to see us anymore, that we were a burden? Carla closed her eyes, pain evident on her face. She took a deep breath before answering. Danny, your youngest son, he was ill. He had a condition called bipolar disorder. Sometimes, it made him think and act in ways that weren't real. But he seemed so certain, Miss Felicia whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Carla hugged her mother again. I know, Mom, and I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I shouldn't have gone out that night. I just wanted to get Danny's medication. I thought you'd be safe for just half an hour. Amanda looked on, her heart heavy. She could see the pain in Carla's eyes, the weight of guilt she had carried for years. Carla, Amanda said gently. It wasn't your fault. You did the best you could in an impossible situation. Carla looked at her friend with gratitude, then turned back to Miss Felicia. Mom, I know we've been through so much. I know you must have been so confused and scared, but if you give me a chance, I'll spend the rest of my life making up for the time we lost. Miss Felicia looked at her daughter, then at Amanda as if seeking confirmation. Amanda nodded encouragingly. I want to try, Miss Felicia finally said, her voice small but determined. Carla breathed a sigh of relief, hugging her mother tightly. Thank you, Mom, thank you for giving me this chance. Amanda watched this scene, feeling a mixture of joy and sadness. She knew the road ahead would be challenging for both Carla and Miss Felicia. Years of separation and trauma couldn't be overcome overnight. But seeing the love in Carla's eyes and the hope on Miss Felicia's face, she knew they had a real chance at healing. Amanda, Miss Felicia's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. Will you stay with us? Amanda felt her heart tighten at the question. She looked at Carla, who nodded softly. Of course I'll stay, Miss Felicia, Amanda replied, smiling. If you want me here, I'll be here with both of you. In that moment, looking at the elderly woman who had entered her life only 2 days before and at the friend she had reconnected with, Amanda felt something shift within her. She was no longer just a lawyer focused on her career, she had become part of something bigger, something more meaningful. As the morning sunlight streamed through the office window, bathing the three of them in light, Amanda silently promised to stay by this family, to help them through the trials ahead. In doing so, perhaps she would find a sense of redemption she hadn't known she was searching for. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it was full of possibilities. And for Amanda, Carla, and Miss Felicia, that was enough for now. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the windows of Amanda's apartment, casting long shadows across the couch where Miss Felicia sat, absently flipping through a book. 2 weeks had passed since their emotional reunion at Amanda's office, and life seemed to have found a new, albeit fragile and uncertain, rhythm. Carla entered the room, carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate, her eyes softening as she saw her mother, a mixture of love and guilt always present in her gaze. Mom, I thought you might like something sweet, she said, handing one of the cups to Miss Felicia. The older woman looked up, a small smile on her lips. Thank you, dear, she murmured, accepting the cup carefully. Carla sat down beside her mother, maintaining a respectful distance. The past 2 weeks had been a careful dance between approaching and retreating, as both tried to rebuild their long-lost relationship. "What are you reading, Mom?" Carla asked, leaning over to look at the book in her mother's lap. "It's a book about miracles," Miss Felicia replied, her voice becoming more animated. "Amanda lent it to me. Did you know there are so many miracles in this life?" Carla smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for Amanda. Her friend had become a vital bridge between her and her mother, providing a neutral and safe ground for both of them. "I do," Carla replied. "Like finding you. I always believed that miracle would happen." The moment was interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. Frowning, Carla stood up. "Strange, we didn't order anything." She opened the door, and her face instantly turned pale. Standing there in the hallway was a middle-aged man with dark hair and a stern expression. "Frank," she whispered, her voice trembling. The man looked at her with a cold gaze. "Hello, Carla. I see you finally found Mom." Miss Felicia, curious about the commotion, moved closer to the door. Seeing the man, she froze, her eyes widening in fear. "Frank," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Frank, Miss Felicia's eldest son, stepped forward. "Dear mother, I've finally found you." Instinctively, Carla positioned herself between Miss Felicia and Frank. "How did you find us?" she asked, her voice tense. "That doesn't matter," he replied coolly. "What matters is that I'm here to bring my mother back home, where she truly belongs." Miss Felicia hid behind Carla, gripping her daughter's shirt tightly. "No," she murmured. "I don't want to go." Frank narrowed his eyes. "Dear mother, you don't understand this woman," he said, gesturing to Carla. "She's the reason. She abandoned you and Danny when you both needed her the most." It felt like a punch to the gut for Carla. "That's not true," she said, her voice shaking with emotion. "I loved my brother Danny. I tried to help him." "Not enough," Frank retorted. "If you really cared, my younger brother would still be alive." Miss Felicia looked back and forth between her eldest son and daughter, confusion and fear evident on her face. "Carla," she whispered, her voice breaking. At that moment, Amanda arrived, hurrying up the stairs. She had received an urgent message from Carla and rushed over to the apartment. "What's going on here?" she asked, quickly assessing the situation. Frank turned to her. "Who are you?" "She's my lawyer," Carla answered swiftly. "And a friend of our family." Amanda stepped forward, maintaining her professional demeanor. "Sir, I suggest we continue this conversation in a more appropriate setting. Perhaps we could arrange a meeting at my office?" Frank stared at her for a moment before reluctantly nodding. "Very well, but this isn't over, Carla. I'll fight for custody of my mother. She deserves to be with someone who truly cares about her." He cast one last cold look at her before turning away, leaving behind a heavy silence. As the door clicked shut, Miss Felicia collapsed, her frail body racked with sobs. Immediately, Carla knelt beside her mother, wrapping her arms around her. "It's okay, Mom," she whispered, stroking her mother's back. "I'm here. I won't let anyone take you away." Amanda watched the scene, her heart heavy. She knew that the battle ahead would be hard and painful for everyone involved. "Carla," she said gently. "We need to discuss this, to prepare a strategy." Carla nodded, still holding her mother close. "I know, but not right now. Mom needs us." Amanda agreed, moving to sit on the couch. Miss Felicia continued to cry, reaching out for Amanda, who took her hand without hesitation. The three of them remained like that for a long time, united in a silent embrace. The shadows in the room grew as the sun set, a fitting metaphor for the dark challenges that lay ahead. That night, after Miss Felicia finally fell asleep, exhausted from the day's emotional storm, Carla and Amanda sat in the kitchen, a cup of strong coffee in their hands. He's going to fight with everything he has, Carla said wearily. Frank has always blamed me for Danny's condition and everything that happened. He's always hated me, resented me. Amanda sighed, rubbing her eyes. Carla, we need to be honest here. Is there something you haven't told me about what happened with Danny? There was a long silence as Carla stared into her coffee cup. When she finally spoke, her voice was full of emotion. The night Danny took my mother away, I yelled at him, Amanda, she admitted. I couldn't take it anymore. Danny's episodes were getting worse, and he refused to take his medication. I was afraid for my aging mother. Amanda closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the confession. Oh. I loved Danny, Amanda, continued Carla, tears now streaming down her face. But I didn't know how to help him anymore. In a moment of exhaustion and pressure, I yelled at my own brother. He ran away and took my elderly mother with him, and 3 years later, her voice faltered, unable to finish. Amanda reached out, squeezing her friend's shoulder. Carla, you did what you thought was best at the time. We can't change the past, but we can fight for the future, for Miss Felicia's life moving forward. Carla nodded, wiping her tears. You're right, but how can we explain all of this to Miss Felicia? She's been through so much already. With honesty, Amanda replied. Miss Felicia is stronger than we think, and now she has both of us by her side. The two friends sat in silence for a while, the weight of revelations and the challenges ahead pressing down on them. Outside, the city continued its hurried pace, unaware of the intense emotions unfolding within the apartment. But in that kitchen, that night, 3 lives had become inseparably intertwined. And while the road ahead seemed dark and uncertain, there was a glimmer of hope. A hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle and make up for the years lost for Miss Felicia. The battle for custody of Miss Felicia had only just begun, but Amanda and Carla were determined to fight with everything they had, not just for Miss Felicia's sake but for the chance at redemption and healing that all of them so desperately needed. The courtroom was silent, a heavy tension hanging in the air. Amanda adjusted her tie, glancing encouragingly at Carla, who sat stiffly beside her. Across the aisle, Frank watched them with a cold expression as his lawyer whispered something into his ear. Miss Felicia sat between Amanda and Carla, her brown eyes filled with worry. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind of emotions and revelations for the elderly woman. Amanda recalled the night they had finally told Miss Felicia the truth about what had happened to her youngest son, Danny. Mom, Carla had said, her voice trembling. There's something you need to know about the night you and Danny left. The elderly woman looked between her daughter and Amanda, nervously twisting her hair. What is it? Taking a deep breath, tears forming in her eyes, Carla had replied. That night. I yelled at Danny. I said terrible things. Miss Felicia had stood there, her eyes wide with shock and confusion. But why? She asked softly. Danny was very ill, causing constant trouble, Carla had replied, her voice filled with regret. I was so exhausted and under so much pressure. I lost control. There had been a long silence as Miss Felicia processed the information. Finally, she spoke, her voice small and breaking. So that's why Danny told me you didn't want us anymore. Carla had quickly embraced her mother. Mom, I always wanted you by my side, always. I just wanted us all to be safe and healthy. Amanda watched as mother and daughter cried together, years of misunderstanding and pain finally surfacing. She felt her own tears fall, a mix of sorrow for the pain they had endured and hope for the future they could build together. The opening of the courtroom doors brought Amanda back to the present. The judge entered, and everyone stood. All rise for Judge Cruzito, the bailiff announced. Judge Cruzito, a middle-aged man with a sharp gaze, took his seat. We are here today to determine the custodial rights regarding Miss Felicia, he began. I understand we have a petition for custody from Mr. Frank, opposed by his sister, Ms. Carla. Is that correct? Yes, Your Honor, both attorneys replied. The trial proceeded with each side presenting their case. Frank's lawyer painted a picture of Carla as a neglectful daughter who had abandoned her sick brother and mother while Frank was working abroad. Amanda, in turn, presented the full truth about Danny's illness, Carla's efforts to help her brother, and how she had never stopped searching for her mother. When it was Ms. Felicia's turn to speak, she stood up shakily, and Amanda placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Ms. Felicia, the judge said gently. Can you share with us how you feel about all of this? Ms. Felicia looked at Carla, then at Frank, and finally at Amanda. Taking a deep breath, she began. I've been angry for a long time, she said, her voice small but steady. Angry at my daughter, Carla, for thinking she didn't want to see me, angry at Danny for taking me away, angry at myself for not understanding what was happening. Tears quietly ran down Carla's face as she listened to her mother. But now, Miss Felicia continued. I understand more. My youngest son was sick, and Carla tried to help but felt powerless. She never stopped looking for me. She turned to Frank. Frank, I know you love me and want to protect me, but understand that during the years you were away, it was Carla who took care of both me and Danny. She was overwhelmed and made mistakes, but she has regretted them and has been searching for me all these years. Frank quietly cried, his cold facade finally breaking down. And Amanda, Miss Felicia said, turning to the lawyer with a small smile. She helped bring us back together. She's part of our family now. Amanda felt her heart tighten at Miss Felicia's words. She hadn't realized how much she cared for the elderly woman until this moment. The judge listened intently, his gaze noticeably softer as Miss Felicia finished. He leaned forward. Thank you, Miss Felicia, he said. After a brief deliberation, he announced his decision. Having heard all testimonies and considering the best interests of Miss Felicia, I hereby grant primary custodial rights to her daughter, Miss Carla. A wave of relief washed over Carla. Amanda smiled, feeling an overwhelming surge of emotion. The judge continued. However, Mr. Frank will have full visitation rights and care privileges. Ms. Felicia needs her whole family, both siblings should come together to care for her and provide her with peace of mind. Frank nodded. For the first time since he arrived, he looked at Carla without hostility. As the trial concluded, Amanda, Carla, and Miss Felicia left the courtroom together. The afternoon sunlight illuminated the courthouse steps, as if welcoming a fresh start for this family. So, Amanda asked, looking at the two women. What do you want to do now? Miss Felicia's eyes held a lingering sadness. I want to see both of my children, Frank and Carla, regularly, she said. Feeling choked up, Carla replied. I'll make sure to stay connected with Frank. I don't want any distance between us anymore. You don't need to worry, Mom, she said, placing her hand on her mother's. Miss Felicia nodded, visibly moved. Amanda reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had helped bring a family back together, but in the process, she had also found a family of her own. She turned to look at the two of them, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in years. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging. Miss Felicia still had much to process and heal, Carla still carried guilt and pain, and Frank still needed to find his place in this newly reunited family. But as she looked up at the bright stars in the sky, Amanda felt hope. Hope that, together, they could overcome any obstacle. Hope that love and understanding could heal even the deepest wounds.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.